Although for a long time I've been calling you Anant, and then everybody who knows you better say, oh, he prefers Ant. So is that? I shouldn't do it. I was just talking to Steve or Stephen, and I was talking about me being Dave or David, but I think it's important. So, Ant, you and I've known each other. I'm just trying to think. I think we met probably in Prague at the engineering stream session that we did out there. Is that 22? Yeah, it's 22. Gosh, I'm losing track of all the...
First post-COVID.
First post-COVID, yeah, because we went from odd numbers to even numbers for Whiffy. So that's where I first met you. And then I've met you several times since then, so we've got to know you. We're old friends now. So I'm pleased about that. I'm so glad you're on the podcast. It's great to have FactSet.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. It's good to have FactSet on the podcast. So just to kick off, I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile. I'm going to put FactSet's URL. And even if you want to give me a specific URL, a bit of FactSet relevant to you, then do that. But for the audience, can you set the scene on who you are and all the multiple companies that you've worked at over your... I'm teeing you up for that. Multiple companies. And if you could explain FactSet and where your bit of FactSet is, the element, the division, the department, whatever you call it, the group. Set the scene a bit if you could.
Sure. So, I've worked at many companies, including FactSet, and FactSet since school. I've been here since 2003. Started pretty much right out of college. I think now I'm a distinguished engineer. I think it's because of the gray hair. So, they have to promote you to something. And I've worked in the real-time group my entire time here at FactSet. So we were originally called market data. Then we became real-time and we were moved into the platform group. And now we're part of the content group or the data solutions organization. So that's kind of where we sit in FactSet.
I mean, my observation is that the real-time market data hasn't been the biggest, the most important part of FactSet. I mean, FactSet, I think I remember it called FactSet Research. Wasn't that the original? Yes. Is that name still used, or is it?
Yep. We're still FactSet Research Systems.
which says something about where it came from. I mean, it came from a different part, and in a sense, you guys, and frankly, it's a bit like Bloomberg. I mean, Bloomberg was the terminal, is the terminal, and frankly, the surprise data side is a newer part and a different part. Yeah. So, I mean, talk me through. Well, in fact, I wrote my list, which I briefly sent to you about 5 minutes before we did this. That was a bit unfair, but I was trying to collect my thoughts. Can we start off with a bit of a discussion from FactSet's perspective, but I also want you to talk more generically. I want these to be educational for an audience out there. And I think the core thing that you are working on, that FactSet is effectively selling, is a data feed, but to be more precise, a real-time data feed. You also sell other data feeds, but the real-time data feed is the one we're talking about. And what I would refer to as an aggregated data feed, a consolidated data feed. In other words, you're taking lots of other data feeds from exchanges, etc., aggregating them, consolidating them into a single feed. And I want to talk around that topic. What issues, what people should know about, what people should understand, what's changed in the last year, the last 10 years, what's going to change about data feeds. That's a very broad topic. So I mean, let me start off. Perhaps logically, I always remember when I used to sell systems, we'd sort of talk about the data coming in at the top, and then it would gradually sort of come down. So the first bit of a data feed is, where do you get the data from? So you are getting the data from other sources.
Yes.
And is that primarily or mainly exchanges, stock exchanges and futures exchanges? Is that the biggest chunk? What else other than exchanges are you?
So we have some direct connectivity to exchanges. We'll have, through some third-party redistributors, connections because getting connections is the hardest part. So we have partnerships with ICE, with TNS, a few others to actually get the exchange data. We still get it in the raw format. We're not using their consolidated feed. So we get the raw format. We take redundant copies. So we'll usually take 2 copies into each data center. If it's multicast, we'll do arbitration to make sure we're getting any lost packets. If we lose it on one copy, we'll get it on the other. We have re-request lines for if we miss it on both. So that's kind of the deal.
So the first thing, so you've got, first of all, to make that connection, and it was interesting because I had Steve Rowe from TNS on. What role does an entity like TNS perform? I mean, you've got, NYSE or ICE effectively, you've got NASDAQ, you've got TMX, you've got London Stock, you've got all 300 exchanges, or I don't know how many you accommodate, but are you literally, what do you use TNS for in that? Is it a technology connection, or is it them sort of almost consulting and telling you how to do it? Help me out. Explain that.
So I'm not on the networking team, so I will go at a higher level than that.
High level.
But so they may have the direct connection, and then depending on where they're located, we'll get a cross. Like they'll connect the exchange. If we're close enough, we'll get a cross connect through them, because it's all commercials basically.
Yeah.
Right. It's all, sure, we could get the line through telco directly to the exchange, but usually if you go through a partner, you can get some sort of deal.
Right. Okay. So all of that data somehow come into a FactSet data center, or as you just alluded, more than one FactSet data center, because you're trying to have some resiliency and redundancy and protect yourself, protect your downstream customers. So where you neatly said you're not in the networking team. The networking team is the people who are responsible for that layer of incoming data. So at what point do you get involved, you and your group?
So once we have connectivity established, right, we start with our feed handlers, which is a component I think everybody has out there. So they make the connection, they do the normalization. So they'll take whatever universal translators, so whatever foreign language is coming in, and we'll convert it into our FactSet internal market data format.
Got it. And that's your fault. You're responsible for that bit.
And many steps after, but yes, that's the first bit.
That's not an insubstantial task, because that universal translator is a good way of describing it. These feed handlers are translating it all into English. You and I are speaking English, that's our language. But the NYSE one is speaking American English, Deutsche Börse is speaking German, Tokyo Stock Exchange is Japanese. I'm mixing the metaphor. Yeah. But in essence, I mean, and how difficult and easy is that? I mean, how different are all, and correct me, is it the right word to use, protocols? Is protocol the right word?
They're often quite different. I wish there's a little more standardization around there. There are a lot that do follow fix fast or itch, or there are some standard formats, but at the end of the day, most people are using some form of binary that has a data spec that you have to parse to normalize out and extract the meaning of some of the more obscure fields that may be exchange specific.
And then, I mean, again, I've been teaching a course recently, and I've been trying to break this down. You're getting this data from them in a particular style, but I suppose the data model is you've got a certain number of records, and a record has a set of fields. So if it's the IBM price is IBM on NYSE, or is it on NASDAQ? It's on NYSE. IBM.N. That's a Reuters. That's a RIC code. I shouldn't say that. And then there is a certain number of fields, which obviously I presume that NYSE have a particular field. Number 1 is bid. Field number 2 is, that isn't the literal one, but they would have a series of fields, and then they would say, and this is where I want you to help educate me. The format, alphanumerics, how long it would be, what format it would be, the data.
So again, it's exchange by exchange. Usually the spec will say things like, you've received, parse the first part. It's a trade, a quote, an update, whatever type of message it is. Then from that, you have what the layout is, and you'll jump to whatever byte has price in it, and it can say price is encoded as ASCII.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it, and sometimes they'll just say it's just this many bytes or just a thing, and you pull it out, and you've got to translate it from ASCII to double, whatever you want to send it as downstream. So things like that.
And I mean, I always remember a cousin of mine who speaks about 4 languages. He said to me, David, once you've learned 2 or 3 languages, the others are quite easy to learn. I mean, I don't speak any other languages, and I find it really hard to think of speaking another language. But in stretching this metaphor of languages, I mean, once you've done a few, does it start to get easier? I mean, does it just become a sort of factory line where, oh, here's another source, and we know how to parse it, we know how to understand and convert a protocol?
Yeah, so the parsing part isn't that difficult, right? That's a pretty standard. You get the specification, you parse out what you need. It's usually when there are condition codes and things, how you want to interpret that field, and that's where it gets a little, messy, for lack of a better word.
And I mean, is there any secret sauce from your side? I mean, are you doing that better than other people are doing that, or is it really everybody does it the same way?
I would like to, everyone does it pretty much the same way. I think the main issue that I've seen is, for certain calculated and derived fields, we'll get a ticket saying, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about the other people, but Big Brother had a different value for this. Why is your value different? And it's not that we did anything wrong. It's just that we have a different calculation we use, right? You're used to one way, we're used to another way.
Yeah.
We include these in, we include, some trade condition in the field that they don't include, or vice versa.
I think I remember, was it volume weighted average price? VWAP is a standard calculator. There was another thing in, I can't remember what it's called, in something in fixed income, and Bloomberg had a particular calculation. I'm going to mention their name because, and other people argued that their calculation wasn't good or wasn't the best, but it became so much the standard that it just got, I believe that number because that's the one everybody else is using. Whether it's right doesn't really matter anymore. It just has become right because that's the one that everybody follows. So again, I think what I'm trying to get at here is I'm trying to do an idiot's guide to how all this works. That's one thing. But then also, where does differentiation start? So we've got that first ingestion layer, and if I'm hearing you right, it's not a massive competitive differentiator how people do that, or is it?
So I think that where potentially differentiation is there is, like I said, we take data into our data centers. Where are your data centers, right? So that kind of leans into latency, resiliency, and those topics. So up until, I would say 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, we were in New Jersey and Virginia, right? Those are our 2 data centers. And so if we were processing data from LSE, make a trip across the pond and then back. And you had distribution and aggregation points, but all the ticker planting and all the connectivity took it back to the US. So over the last 3-4 years, we've done a massive global expansion. So in Europe now, we're in London and Frankfurt. In Asia Pac, we're in Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, hopefully going to be in Korea next year.
But you've just said something. I'm going to show. I'm asking the idiot questions here, because that location of data centers has two. There are 2 considerations. The data coming in is one, and the data going out is different. So, if I am in Europe, in London, let's accept the fact that London is in Europe. Some people would disagree, but London's in Europe. Then obviously your data. Sorry, where did you say your data centers were in Europe again?
London and Frankfurt.
Okay, so London. So the London Stock Exchange, obviously, that's a quick hop in, and it's a quick hop out because I'm a London-based client, and that's great. But then Tokyo, again, your Asian ones, I should have listened more carefully.
We have one in Tokyo, yes.
So there's one in Tokyo. So the Tokyo Stock Exchange could feed into that. But then if I'm a London-based client, it's got to get all the way over to me. So at some point, you've in each of these big centers, you've got the totality, the literal consolidated cache. Is that a
Yes,
good word, a
exactly.
right word?
That's the correct word. Yes. So so it's exactly what you're saying, right? So we're putting up these feed handlers and ticker plants to do local processing. So the goal, and again, the differentiation is where people may have these data centers and how they fail between them if there's an event,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, yes, the goal is for London, we process it in London. If you're a London client, you're going to get that copy. If for some reason there's a catastrophic failure in our London data center, you're going to fail over to Frankfurt, right? You're not going to fail back to the US. You're not going to incur a huge hit in latency. It's a relatively, I'm not good
And
with European geography, but a short
yeah,
hop.
it is a short hop.
Yeah.
But London. So the London. So you got the London Stock Exchange feed going into your London data center, and then I presume that feeds to your German, your Frankfurt data
We have
center.
a separate diverse copy to Frankfurt.
Okay, so there's a separate communication connection between LSE to Frankfurt. Okay, I mean it must be a spider's web, a matrix of.
Yeah, that is actually the goal, right? A fully redundant web of connectivity. So
And doesn't your size? I mean, I'm going to say names of companies. You know, obviously, my old mob, Reuters, that then became Thomson Reuters, then became Refinitiv, is now LSEG. LSEG Data and Analytics to separate it from the stock exchange. They because over the years and years and years they're bigger and bigger. Doesn't that give them an advantage because they got more data centers in more places, and therefore aren't they more resilient than you?
so it's a mixture, right? So one is, and this is why we have partnerships with companies like TNS, ICE,
Yeah.
and them. So we can get that, diverse two connections to Frankfurt, two to London, whatever we need. The other thing is, even though you have all the data centers, it's what are you doing in them, right? Are you actually doing the feed handling and processing? Because I've heard, again, it's all here because you don't know how the secret sauce is made by others, but a lot of people, for example, for Asia Pac, because it is expensive and it's big,
Yeah. Yeah.
that they'll do their primary processing there. But if something were to happen, it'll still fail back to, say, the US, right? That's where the second copy lives. So we've been trying to focus on that. And one of the things, little plug for the company,
No.
but like one of the big things we also have done is we have this partnership with AWS where we've been putting everything into the cloud. And that's really, really allowed us to do this all in effectively like a 3-year time span, right? We went from 2 to however many I just rattled off
A lot.
in about 3 years. And that was because we have the cloud. The cloud allows for just reproducibility. Like, it's, from an engineering perspective, it's actually pretty amazing what they've done. Like, I can take a configuration and literally, pretty much all I'm doing is saying, do you have the same machine type? Occasionally they don't. Usually they do. And then just change it. Say, don't run it in US East 1. Run it in AP East 1. And
I mean that late start. That's a late start advantage, because when my old mob, now I'll say the old Reuters, and started out, they had to build all their own data centers because the cloud didn't exist then. I mean, cloud is just a data center. It's just the nature of how it's managed and organized and run. But in essence, it's a data center, and it must. And I guess the more legacy players, they've got to move everything to the cloud, whereas you just started out putting it in the cloud. Does that give you an advantage?
So I would say now it gives us a speed advantage. And then the main thing, again, right, so when everything was in our data centers, we had the same issue, right? So even though we started our journey, I forget when the official press announcement was, maybe 2020, let's say, the first 2 years were just, how do you move it? Right? There was a lot of a learning curve there. But once we got it up there, it was just, we started rubber stamping. And then really shouldn't say the holdup, but the difficulty has been multicast.
Yes.
So right, all the major feeds are multicast. The cloud had, and in my opinion, has a lot of limitations around multicast.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do, because at that point, I think we're late adopters, we're early adopters ish for the cloud. We said, you know what, it's probably safer to do the feed handling on-prem, right? Do that
Right.
multicast, the arbitration, the connectivity, those things that we are very familiar with.
Yeah.
So that's actually why we have these data centers. So what was neat was they're small, they're tiny, right? We don't have a full gamut of the hundreds of hosts we have here in the U.S. We're like, hey, we just need XYZ feed handlers that are multicast. The TCP ones actually we just forward straight to the cloud.
Right.
So we say, okay, so we can do this with a small footprint, maybe 10, 12 hosts for bigger exchanges, redundancy, whatever. And then boom, we're there, right? And then it's the issues of getting the connectivity, running stuff, payments, stuff I don't understand, right? Procurement. But I'm saying like that's been kind of the big thing. But once we get it, we're off to the races because the rest of it, right, from the ticker plant down, is in the cloud, and it's literally that. You have it here, you move it here. And then
it's a horses for courses thing, isn't it? It's like the cloud suits certain things, but not everything. So again, if you pick where to leverage the cloud's benefits, but effectively to sidestep that multicast scenario.
Yeah.
Again, a very sweeping question. Reliability, redundancy. I mean, very, very important. But hasn't the technology world got so good that they don't go down very much? Although you do still hear about data center going down and outages. I mean, how would you describe the world of outages these days compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago? I mean, is it getting better or is it just different?
I'd say probably different. I think that we have a lot more, right? The reason you don't hear about it is I don't think we have those big bang outages anymore where it's like this entire data center was gone and then this thing stopped working. It's like there's failover built on failover built on failover. And I feel like it used to be mainly financial companies that cared about that kind of uptime and whatever.
Yeah.
But now it's everybody, right? All these cloud providers, everything. They're trying to be very high availability and fault tolerant, for lack of a better word. It's not about failing. It's about, okay, if this fails, another component comes in, and it shouldn't be noticeable to the client, right? That's the biggest thing.
And I mean, governments are now sticking their nose into this whole reliability. I hope I've got this right from memory. DORA is the big one in Europe, but there's other regulations around the world. How is that playing out where you're sitting? Is that putting pressure on you, or were you doing that? I've heard some people say, well, we were doing that anyway. We should be doing that anyway.
So I vaguely remember hearing about your fancy European regulations, but yeah, I mean, we just, most of it you do as a course of business, right? It's not good to be, all eggs in one basket. If something happens, you're in big trouble. I think I believe the regulations now are something around having multiple cloud providers and things like that.
I think it's
where they're moving.
I think the OR in DORA is operational resilience. It's all about governments thinking to themselves, the financial markets are really important, and we want to make sure that those companies who are running the IT, the banks, the vendors, have really, really thought about resilience and redundancy, because we're telling them if they haven't, they'll be in trouble.
Right. So again, just from a FactSet perspective, right, what we've done is, again, what I consider this the basics, right? So you always have stuff in two data centers. Like that's a no-brainer. So the thing is, in the cloud, you'll have I'll use the Amazon words because I don't know the other company's words, but effectively you have your availability zones, which are two physical buildings, if you will, but they're in the same location. So what we've done is we said, okay, great, we're going to do two availability zones and two regions. So then you're, somewhere else. So you effectively have four-way resiliency. So if that building has an issue, clients don't notice. They move to the other building down the block.
Yeah.
if that whole area has an issue, and that's where the whole London, Frankfurt, or whatever comes into play, you move across down the block, across the street,
I,
and then worst case halfway around the world. But
yeah, no, and
so,
that makes a lot of sense. So working our way downwards, you've got all these feeds coming in. You're building in resilience, failover, reliability, all those wonderful words. And we touch a little bit on latency because, again, where the data is coming from, those hops. I mean, are you guys at FactSet? Where does low latency, ultra low latency? Are you trying to play in that game, or is that not your game?
So ultra low latency is definitely not our game. Though, I'm going to get in trouble with the marketing people, but I like to say we play in the reasonable or expected latency game, right? Yeah. So if you're if you're in Metro, right, if you're in London, we're taking the data there, bringing it up, bringing it down, a couple milliseconds, some processing. So in general, I think we say, if we had to say in a bucket across all the exchanges, we're shooting for about 50 milliseconds or less, right? And that includes things like bigger places, right? So in the US, stuff is in New York, AWS is in Virginia. So if you're a client trying to leverage our feeds in Virginia, you can't expect the same latency as you would get out of our New Jersey data center, right? You are just further away.
And again, my observation about the whole latency discussion is it was a big hot topic, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, still is, but it's a very small percentage of the market, the high frequency trading world. It's the vast majority of the financial markets, the capital markets, in my sense, are not interested in or needing of ultra low latency data. So that's my sense.
So again, this is opinion, but my thoughts on it are the people who were interested or are interested, right, in that ultra low latency, high frequency, they're putting their servers, they're doing their colo with the exchange. They're taking care of that, right?
Exactly.
When you're in that arms race, you don't even want anyone between you and the exchange, right?
Exactly.
You want full control. After that, we're talking about, like I said, in Metro, it's a lot smaller. Let's say 10 milliseconds, right? But then as you go further and further away, it's just expected latency. That's the way I view it. And I think people are more concerned now with the amount of data.
Right.
They're just literal amount of data coming out of exchanges. I mean, especially the options, warrants, there are automated systems that can handle it. But for humans, right, on a workstation or on an application or trying to do some analysis, there's just too much data. So I think people are more interested in, don't give me all the data as fast as possible. Chunk it up. Give me a quarter of a second update, fifth of a second, half a second.
So this is the magic word conflation, or throttling. Conflation, throttling. Those are two words that.
Yeah.
In fact, I was going to switch my questions, and we can address it. What are the issues you're hearing about? I mean, I'm hitting you with some high level things, but I'm not as involved in this as you are. Yeah. So, I mean, day to day, when you're responding to your downstream customers, what are they mainly focused on? What are the hot issues? What are the difficulties they're trying to address?
Right. So, if we stick with conflation, right? So, conflation's been a hot topic lately because to process Opera now, the U.S. options feed, you need a 100 gig connection. Everybody isn't going to pay for a redundant 100 gigabit connect. They're expensive. So they're like, okay, give it to me conflated to 1 second.
Right.
Fine. Not a big deal. Then there's this topic of trade safe conflation, right? So there's basically when a trade happens.
Yeah.
So generally people want their quotes conflated, right? There's something like 100 or 1,000 to 1 is the quote ratio.
You were talking about every second or whatever, which is periodic conflation, but could you not? I want every 10 ticks. Does that sound like? I mean, there's two different ways you could look at that. You either do it on a time interval base, or do you do it every 10th or every 20?
I think people in general have wanted it time based.
Right.
The 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 thing that has become interesting lately is, right, it used to be everybody wanted trade safe conflation. So it was when a trade occurred, even if your timer hasn't expired for the quotes,
Right.
give me the quote that made that trade happen. Right. Just,
Yeah.
boom, send the quote, give me the trade. So that was the thing. Because it was, again, 1,000 quotes, one trade, still getting the benefit. Who cares? Now, as the volume of trades has increased, people are saying, oh, wait, maybe I don't want trade safety. I just want a guaranteed, I call it the guaranteed theoretical maximum, right? So
Yeah.
if you have 3,000 instruments and they're ticking once a second, most, you're going to get 3,000 ticks for that second. That's it. Once you throw in every trade could push something out, if there's some market event or, our fine president sends a tweet, all of a sudden you're no longer insulated from the quote volume because these trades are effectively doubling what you're doing. In reality, it's not quite doubling. It's about a 20 to 50% increase, but
Do you find, that's interesting, the quote versus the trade. So bid and ask are all the quotes, the orders/quotes.
Yep.
And then the last price, the last trade is the trade post-trade rather than pre-trade, and post-trade is another way of describing it. And I can understand the conflation on the pre-trade, the quotes, as you describe it. For the last price, which I presume by definition there are, I was going to say a lot less, but I can definitely say there's less. I don't know if it's fair to say a lot less.
A lot less, yeah.
I don't know. Unfair. I have no idea about it. What's the ratio of quotes to trades? Do you track those statistics? I've never.
We do, and it varies wildly by market.
Yeah.
So I think was it for U.S. equity markets? I want to say it's about 100 to 1.
Right.
So 100
that
quotes,
sort of scale.
Yeah. For the options market, I think it's 1,000 to 1.
Right.
I would have to go back and look.
On this conflation, do people want the post-trade, the last price data to be conflated as well? Or do they want every one of those?
So that's where I was sort of going right now. So the first it was, I want trade safety. So I want the pre-trade and the trade that happened because of it. Now people are like, oh, I want the trade, and the quote information can just happen when it happens. And then there's the last bit of people who are like, we want it pulsed. I call it pulsed instead of conflated, where they're literally like, we just want one update every half a second. That's just what we want.
Do you have a dial at your end where customer ABC want it this way, and I'll twiddle the dials until they get it that, or do they have the dials at their end? Where's the control of that? Does everybody have different settings?
So we're in the process of building the dials, because originally everybody just wanted trade safe conflation, and that's just what we had, and that's what everyone got. And now, again, because of the volume of information and how people want to manage it, people have started asking us, can you give us these additional knobs?
So they can
like,
yeah. Because the whole thing about too much data is, I always use the analogy, is you can't drink from a high pressure water hose. It's like, you just can't. So you need to slow it down. Okay, so conflation, pulsing, all of that, great. What other things are the downstream customers asking you for? And again, I suppose interestingly, there's two reasons they might be asking you for it. They might be asking it because one of your competitors has it already, and they're saying, if you want me to buy your stuff, you better do that as well. And then there's, nobody does this, and I really wish somebody did it. Won't you guys please be the first to do it? There's two different things there. What are some of those things?
I think that's one. The other thing people are always looking for is, just like we want the redundancy from the exchanges, they want the redundancy from us.
Right.
So they're looking for, great, now that a lot of your stuff is in the cloud, right? They want that guarantee. Are you actually connecting to the two availability zones? Are we getting when this failover event? So there's a lot more sort of I think there's always been, but they're looking for transparency from us and transparency from Amazon as far as what is happening in those interconnects.
And is that managed by SLAs? Is that just detailed, almost contractual terms saying, will you sign in blood that that's the way? Because they can't come and physically inspect it, can they? I mean, they've got to trust you when you tell them.
But I mean, that's always been there, right?
Yeah,
I don't think they come into the data center.
I know, yeah.
Shuffling through your.
I suppose what happens over time is people start to understand what's going on behind the scenes, and therefore they start asking more probing questions and asking you to sign in blood, that you've done it that way.
Yeah, and especially with things like the cloud, I think it's just a familiarity, right? It's like you're saying, as people get more familiar, not only can they ask better questions, but they're more at peace. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but right, there are things that you've trusted for a very long time because it was on-prem and you understood how it worked, and now it's in the cloud behind the veil of whatever cloud provider. And so it's building the trust in that system.
So let's sneak into the cloud conversation, because you've mentioned that you started out with AWS. And AWS really, from my understanding, were the first into this game. They were the first to sort of engage with the capital markets, with the market data industry, blah, blah, blah. But then Google came along, and we've now got Oracle big time. I'm less clear about Microsoft and Azure. But I mean, again, we also alluded to the European regulations. You should have more than one cloud provider. I looked up at one point when I was trying to do a training course, the difference between multi-cloud and poly-cloud. I can't remember which is which, but there's different ways you can either run your same applications on two cloud providers, so you've got a sort of resilience, or you can say, well, we'll put all our foreign exchange stuff with AWS and we'll do all our equity stuff with Google, which isn't, I mean, it's bad meta, but you know what I mean?
Makes sense.
Those are two different approaches.
Yep.
So, I mean, how do you approach that? I mean, have you got poly, whatever, cloud strategies, plans, actions?
So right now, for our market data piece, right, we're only in AWS, and our resiliency is we're leveraging whatever it is, 12 regions or something like that in AWS, right? Where we're just making sure that we're geographically diverse and safe that way. The conversation comes up time to time. The one thing we've done to sort of prepare for it, for if and when that stage comes, is we try to use only the basic building blocks in AWS, right? Where we're using EC2s, load balancers, nothing super proprietary specific to AWS, so that if we had to, hopefully not getting us in trouble with AWS, but it's just planning ahead, because like you're saying, if a regulation comes along and they say, hey, you need to have at least one other provider, right? We would just need to figure out how to write the Terraform for them, and just boom, we can move over. So the issue's always been the connectivity.
So it might be governments telling you've got to have this resilience. It might be big customers, I don't know if they are, saying we don't like the fact you're only with, irrespective of which one it is. Or it might be a customer who says, we are only Oracle, or we're only, I mean, how does that play out?
So when that happens, usually what we do is we say, it's fine, right? The thing is, from what I've seen, almost all the cloud providers, they're all in the same physical place. So it's like, okay, you're in, let's say, Oracle in Tokyo, and we're in AWS. We just connect to Oracle there, right? It's a small hop. It's not some, right? At the end of the day, we wouldn't want to move every single component to each cloud for each client, right? Because that's a lot of stuff, a lot of connectivity to the exchanges, a lot of maintenance, a lot of things that can go wrong. But we could run one chain in an availability zone in Amazon and another one in another provider. And there's some connectivity stuff there, but it's mainly connectivity and the cost of transferring data in and out.
I'm going to pick up on something you said, which I think is, everything is interesting, but particularly interesting. That point about we don't necessarily use all the sweet bits and pieces that AWS had, because I think you don't want to get quote unquote stuck because if you're a vendor, and I remember this, we loved being sticky. If we could be sticky, that's what you strive for. I mean, it's the complete opposite. A customer wants flexibility, but frankly, you as a vendor, you want somehow your customers to be stuck to you. Sometimes you have to resist that and be so unsticky, because the problem, I'm getting mixed up in my head on this, the problem if you're too sticky, then customers just don't like that at all. But aren't you missing out? If you don't leverage some of the super duper weird and wacky widgets within the AWS, aren't you missing a trick? You're missing some really cool thing that you could take advantage of.
So, and again, this is from some limited trials I've done.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we've avoided all of it, right? Just for our core feed handler ticker plant, right?
I understand why. I'm the sticky point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we have Dynamo databases and things like that, but even those, there is the equivalent technology in the other cloud. It's just how difficult it is to move into there, right? So it's like an example would be Kafka, right? So you could have a Kafka queue, or Amazon has its flavor that's Kinesis. Kinesis has a lot of nice things as far as how it scales up and how it scales down, and some performance benefits in this. Or you can just use their Kafka, and then you can use Kafka in a competing cloud if you wanted to. So it's just taking the pros and cons with it of like, what's more important at this time? How difficult is it to change, right? How stuck are you in the sticky mess? So that's just something that we've been, it's always tempting, right? They have some neat stuff, and it's very, very tempting to go down that road. But knowing that there, maybe a government, a client, an exchange, somebody who comes and says you can't be all in one spot, we've been sort of careful and mindful.
Yeah. I mean, let's address another issue, which is, maybe it's the elephant in the room. It's the sort of comments that a lot of people are making, and where your FactSet's names comes up in a positive way, which is this concern that my old company, that is now LSEG Data Analytics, have got too much of these are negative words, but stranglehold would be how other people would say it, and that somehow is a negative thing for the overall industry and the market. But I'll play devil's advocate here. Matt Eddy over at LSEG's a good friend of mine. I feel a certain affection for that world, and they have a lot of arguments they would put as to why that shouldn't be a problem. But my point that I made to you before when we were offline is there a danger of jumping out of the frying pan into the fire? So yes, this one group has got some sort of stranglehold, but then you just move over to somebody else who are so wonderful, is so good, that you embrace them, you go, and then you end up in a stranglehold with them because you've jumped from the frying pan into the fire. How?
I mean, at the end of the day, right, we're all selling products. One thing that I think is interesting is, I mean, again, this is maybe a little bit more of my opinion than the company opinion. No, but I like what you were saying about not being too sticky, right?
Yeah.
I would like to see, more openness in the APIs and standards, so that customers can switch. Right? There's no right. I think that's kind of the breakthrough people are looking for.
Yeah.
Right now, right? LSEG Data Analytics, right? They have the stranglehold. There's no benefit in them to saying, "Hey, everybody, come join the party." But if hopefully it's us, and or a few other people get into the game, then all of a sudden it becomes this more like, okay, we're all competing. How can we make these APIs and protocols more standardized so clients actually have true choice?
And again, I remember when I was in Reuters, as it was back in, when was this? I joined Reuters in '89, so it's all through the '90s. We called ourselves Open Systems, the Open Systems Group. That was the phrase, and because actually, to exactly what we're talking about, yeah, we sort of wanted to be sticky, but we also wanted to promote our non-sticky credentials. Yeah, we're sticky because we're good. You want to
Hmm.
use our good stuff.
Yeah,
But look, here are all these APIs, here are all these connect. You can use somebody else if you want. I mean, hopefully we can persuade you that what we have is really good, but we're persuading you because it is good, not
yeah,
because you're stuck with it. And I think
exactly,
that that
exactly.
that hopefully, I mean, again, I think that's where it alluded to. And look, I I ask a question quite often, and I say to people in the, so what's going on in the industry? You know, what of all the vendors out there, which is the vendor that you're getting the most positive vibe from? And I don't know if it could be 10 times out of 10, but definitely 9 times out of 10, it's FactSet. So you guys are doing something right at the moment. There's a
Yeah,
you, but it could be, being cynical, late starter advantage. You know, you're coming in, you can change
yeah.
things because you're fighting. And I think I don't do an analogy. Oracle. I think Oracle are doing great things to disrupt the. But that's because they've come to the party a bit later than AWS and Google and
Yeah.
Microsoft. Is
I
that
mean,
fair?
it's fair, right? It's where you learn from your own mistakes, but it's also much nicer to learn from other people's. So
Yeah, yeah. And you're the
I just,
disruptors.
yeah,
You're trying to
yeah,
disrupt
yeah.
the status quo. So look, I mean, jumping ahead. I mean, we have, gosh, we're not in whatever it's been. Actually, we're almost near the end, so I've got to be a bit careful. Very quickly, before we start to wrap up, that was the data feed discussion. We didn't finish it. There's lots more to talk about on that side. But the next jump is down to what I would call market data systems. And that's where I would have put Triarch, RMDS, TREP, RTD. That's where I put BCC groups. Gosh, I should know. I love them. One is it the One Market Data System that's their
Yeah,
product, and
yeah.
then Terry Roche and Bob Gonaguru with Markets.io have got their product. There's X, as I said. So what? How do you see that space? What's going on in that space?
So, I mean, yeah, we have good relationships with all of them. I think they're coming in and they're trying to, like you're saying, remove some of that stickiness, right? They're saying they want to be the sticky thing, and then people can swap the provider out from underneath. That's, I believe, the goal of all of those people. Um, and yeah, I mean, I understand like why that space exists. Uh, the the one, I think the one thing is it's another layer, right? So it's always a translation from the provider to the intermediary to the client, um, and it it all depends on what the client's looking for, right? If some clients want the full control, right? They would rather talk directly to the source and make sure that's optimal and make sure they understand everything that's going on. If they want to take that step back and are willing to accept, that someone is in between and you now potentially have sort of two parties to deal with. But it's
Are creeping to the last 10 minutes or so. And I think in the last 10 minutes or so, I always offer, look, what are the big talk? You were sitting down, really looking forward to this conversation with David Anderson because you were gonna tell me two or three things that really are important to you in the seat that you sit in. So what are the really important things you're working on that you want the world to know about?
we touched on two of them, which is all the different flavors of conflation and all the resiliency and
Those
globalization.
dials, those
Yeah.
knobs that we that
The other thing is just it's funny, right? We always talk about the emerging markets. They've all
yeah.
emerged, right? It's been so crazy, over the last whatever you want to say, 10 years even. Just watching all these markets that used to be like, oh, it's an obscure market or it's okay to like, nope, we want the Hanoi Stock Exchange. That is an absolute
Yeah.
requirement because of Vietnam is up and coming. So the fact that there are all these places, and the closer that we're able to get because either technology there or cloud providers there, so we don't have to go finding a space. We can
Yeah.
just be like, boom, it's there, and we can start setting up. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we want to go because it's not just the businesses are there and the markets are there, but I see like investment companies and stuff popping up there, right? Everybody wants in. There are local companies that understand the local markets better. So I think that's
Well,
globalization.
there's another trend that's happening out there, which is related a little bit to all these far-flung markets, which is and I always get my numbers wrong here. Is it 24 by 5? I don't think it's 24 by 7. The idea is extended trading hours of the US markets or of any market, because the world is global, and there's an appetite and hunger to trade in all these different markets. Ideally 24 hours a day. I think most of them shut at the weekends, although I've heard it 23 hours because they need an hour to sort a few things out. Are you seeing that, hearing that? How does that play out in your world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things in front of the SEC right now for the US exchanges. Again, everyone wants to make their money. From a technology perspective, is a cost. It's just a cost. Right. So there's all kinds of overnight maintenance we do.
Right.
And right now we take whatever, let's say 3 hours to do it. Now you only have an hour. So it's a mixture of, we'll have to throw more compute at it to do it faster. And then the things, right, the corporate actions, the ticker changes and those things. My hope would be that the exchanges that are doing this realize we should only do those over the weekend or times when there's longer periods of time to do it. Because making sure the information is there. There's a lot of like last minute stuff that right now the exchange may send out a notice late or something. We get it in before open because we have time before open. Now, if there's no time before open because you're always open, so it's, but
in fact, you bigger topic, the whole issue of notifications, the whole fact that you're dealing with all these incoming feeds and they're all changing all the time. They're not some static. It's hard enough to ingest them day one, but then they change and you've got to accommodate all those changes. I mean, that is a vast task.
The dreaded exchange mandated change.
Exactly, which do it tomorrow, or the next day.
Yeah.
I know it's crazy. Look, and we could have talked for hours. There is a million other things. And look, we are going to carry on talking. We're going to talking at all the different events that we do around the world. Again, I was trying to do this as a bit of an educational thing, not least because I don't understand all this stuff. I used to understand it, but I've not been involved in this as much as possible. I don't know how educated I'm sure the people who are tasked with doing this know this backwards, front, sideways, but hopefully we've educated a few people who are not directly involved in this, but who in some way get involved with it. Those are the people I'm trying to help, not the people directly responsible, but the people sort of working around the edges on this. So I hope we succeeded. So look, all remains for me to say is a massive, massive thank you. And to finally comment, you are so blue. The more I look, every so often the lighting changes, and I think your face goes a bit blue as well because it's blue shirt, blue background.
It's a blue screen instead of a green screen. I'm just a floating head at this point, like Oz.
I know. I'm very red. I'm looking at my face. I'm very red in the face, so not to worry. Look, and we'll talk again soon. Don't hang up. I'm going to stop the recording. Bid farewell and thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're so welcome.